Good morning, 9 a.m., August 17th, 2023 on a Thursday. While watching 2023 on a Thursday. While watching 2023 on a So what I was about to say was that instead of playing the audio over in a way that you could hear it, I was going to try a different technique that occurred to me while I was watching Ken Stout trying to use the Doug technique for confirming audio. If I mute the sounds of programs and tabs on XSplit so that you can't hear them, I should be able to unmute the stream and I would hear it in my headset, but you won't hear it. That way, yeah, see, I can hear it now. But I don't think you're hearing that right now while I have that unmuted, right? Yeah, because there was no echoing back and forth. So I was able to hear what I was saying and you weren't able to hear what I was saying. So I can get a confirmation of audio without giving you that disturbing echo effect. Now, if I unmute it, I'm unmuting the other tabs so that if I play something, you will be able to hear it. Interesting. Well, to me. Oh, things can be interesting to a Doug that other people don't care about. I know that. I got a couple of email replies from Sin, aka the Drunken Troll. And one of them came after the last episode, and his subject line for both of these emails says, Wintermute nailed it. So 6:18 p.m. my time. He says, so I'm assuming EFI is tied to UEFI. Kind of, sort of. We'll try to give a little definition of that. So now, in the sense that EFI both stands for extensible file, or no, what is it? Extensible firmware interface. So let's come back over to here. So now I need to understand what the heck is going on here. Looks like storing data. This reminds me of Niels Bohr's quote. If you're talking about something you know nothing about, you're going to get dizzy. I already found a video how to delete it using command. This is basically the disk part, using disk part to delete a partition. They're showing they're deleting the EFI partition, but that video doesn't give any caveats or warnings about that. So don't be doing that just yet. But I am not sure that is a reasonable remedy. Maybe it's better to just leave it there. Wisdom Doug will know what's best. Well, one of the problems with Wisdom Doug knowing what's best is I'm not sure what your objective is, Sin. Now, when I come up here, researching, now that makes sense. So I guess this means he's been researching since that last email. These two emails were a day apart, August 15th on this one, August 16th on this one. Now that makes sense. If that is a kernel, the EFI partition, I don't think it's fair to call that a kernel. I'll go back and install Linux operating system. I'll install Linux OS. My goal is Kali Linux and then Tsurugi Linux equals data forensics. So I'm not sure, what is your end objective here? Are you had first told us about removing one drive and you couldn't boot Windows. Do you need that Windows operating system to be bootable? Or do you just want to wipe out both drives and go to Tsurugi Linux or Kali Linux? I'm not sure what the end goal here is, but the thing that you've come across in, and I think chat room will verify this. I mean, what I think we've got going is when you removed the Sabrent drive, you were no longer able to boot on the Samsung drive. The Samsung drive, we confirmed, has your C drive Windows image, but the Sabrent has your EFI partition, and the EFI partition tells your computer where to find the Windows boot partition. So they're on two separate drives. That's very unusual. You really don't want to do that. I can't think of any reason why you would want that. I think it happened accidentally. Now, if you just go delete that EFI partition that's on the Sabrent drive, then your Windows partition is not going to boot. until you somehow recreate an EFI partition in the right place. I don't know if the Windows repair, automatic repair will do that. So I don't think you just want to go deleting that. And I don't know if what you have on the Windows partition is important to you, the installed programs, the data. If it doesn't, then I would just wipe out all the partitions on both of the drives and get started clean with what you actually want. Now let's go take a look at address some of your other questions. UEFI versus EFI partitions. When I saw that question that you're asking, I thought, okay, well, how are we going to phrase this? And I'm not sure, am I really capable or qualified of identifying this? So I asked ChatGPT, explain UEFI versus EFI partition. I'm not going to read through all of what it gave us, but it's basically along the lines of what I was figuring, except it really doesn't identify in here. UEFI is what we're thinking of when we go into what we could call your BIOS, but BIOS is kind of the outdated term anyway. UEFI settings is where we do your configuration of your computer hardware. The EFI is an older terminology of what we now think of as UEFI, but EFI we also use to refer to the EFI system partition. A little bit different there. So I think it's fair to say that where it says right here, UEFI is an evolution of EFI. Now, I don't think we ever had an EFI configuration screen as in BIOS, basic input output system. But so there's a little bit of nuance here about how are you using EFI. When we're referring to the system partition, EFI system partition, they give us another acronym here, of course, because we don't have enough TLAs around. That's three-letter acronym. And if you didn't know the three-letter acronym, it's TLA. ESP is EFI system SP partition. So ESP is EFI system partition. So that's kind of, I can't even think of that term in programming where there's a programming code wrapped inside another programming code, not circular. It's somebody's going to give it in chat. I know the word, I just can't think of it right now. So I'm not going to read through all this, but I'll just display them on the screen so you can go back, rewind the video, and pause in these places if you want to read it. EFI extensible firmware interface are showing here. UEFI is unified extensible firmware interface. And then EFI system partition. So they're given three different things here. And then they're dealing with the key differences between those. Think of them as three terms. I'm going to think of them as three terms because the EFI subtly different than EFI partition. In summary, UEFI and EFI partitions are both related to the modern firmware. Now here it kind of sounds like they're saying UEFI partitions and EFI partitions. No. UEFI is not a partition, right? It's where we go into CMOS settings. Oh, another one. That's a four-letter acronym. The word partitions here is affiliated with EFI, not with UEFI. Recursive. Thank you, Wintermute. That's what I was trying to get to. Is that this term back here was wherever it was is recursive, where there's a TLA inside of another TLA. And then here, so then I thought, well, okay, kernel. How do we identify what kernel is? In computer operating systems, a kernel is a fundamental component that acts as an intermediary between the hardware of a computer, blah, 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 yeah. And basically the way that I would summarize it is any operating system is going to have its own kernel. It's essentially what sits between the user and the programs that they're using and the hardware of the computer. I like to think of it as the operating system. Now, in the work that I do, I never have to define, I never go to my clients and say, well, your kernel was broken. And they say, kernel what? And they say, do you mean Colonel Klink? Not Sergeant Schultz. Ay, caramba. So here's, I'm scrolling down to this other part in case you want to go back and read through all of this gobbledygook. And it's a lot of gobbledygook where they're trying to identify the kernel as a critical part of an operating system. Okay, they're right there for each operating system is going to have its own kernel. But that EFI partition, no, I don't think you're right calling that a kernel, because that EFI partition is going to tell your computer where to go find the bootable operating system. That bootable operating system is going to have its own kernel. Not an expert on this subject. This is my understanding. If somebody wants to disagree with me, to put it in chat or put it in comments after the video. So I think that's all I got for Sin, aka Drunken Troll, today. I would like to know, what is your end goal here? What do you really want? Do you want to go just wipe out everything you got and go straight to Linux? And I'm not going to be able to help you very much with that. Definitely not a Linux expert, and don't really want to become that at this point in time. But I do like your objective of data forensics. Data forensics? Is that what you're... Well, yeah, I guess so. I normally think of it as security, as going after hackers and securing systems. But forensics is where you're trying to take maybe a damaged drive and trying to find actual data on it, or maybe you're trying to figure out what happened on a computer in the past, which I guess Linux tools might be useful for that. What is it that you want to do with data forensics? Are you trying to get into data forensics, which is different, in my mind, from security? All right, so now let's move on to channel comments, and then we'll get to chat. Going down here to the oldest comment, I think I need to zoom this in a bit. Yeah, I'm at 100%. And then scroll down. Costanza the Mage. I kind of was trying to put an N in there, I think. Back when Windows 11 first came out, I dual booted Windows 10 and 11 on two separate NVMe SSDs. When it became clear that Windows 11 was stable, I cleared the Windows 10 drive out. What happened was that I was unable to boot due to the boot partition being on the SSD that had Windows 10 on it. Luckily, I had an Acronis backup where I was able to copy over the boot partition over to the Windows 11 drive. It sounds like this is what was happening with your viewer with the Sabrent and Samsung drives. I agree completely with that, Costanza. Yeah, that sounds like a good summary of what we've been talking about here. And he apparently had the same thing going on there, where his Windows 10 drive had the EFI boot partition. When he wiped out the Windows 10 disk, the entire disk, all of the partitions, he's no longer able to boot Windows 11. He doesn't make any comment there about whether he tried to do Windows repair mode. Will Windows 11 recreate that EFI partition? I don't think so. I think that would be beyond its capabilities. So his solution was to restore an image backup of the Windows 11. Let's see. How did he do that? I had a Acronis backup able to copy over the boot partition over to the... Oh, he restored just the EFI partition from the Windows 10 image backup to the Windows 11 drive. That EFI boot partition, I would think, would have had the information on it for how to boot either of those two operating systems, because yeah, it knew about both of them. So apparently restoring it to the Windows 11 drive worked. Interesting. Then, Costanza's in the chat. Great, that's correct. Just the actual small 100 megabyte boot partition. Great, thank you. Then Pineapple Road, his comment here. Oh, let's see, I need to point out this. Costanza's was in relation to Windows Daily 273, which was the last show 2 days ago. And then this one from Pineapple Road, 5 Steps to Resolving Blue Screen of Death, the premiere that I aired yesterday. It's a shame that I didn't know about this channel, if it even existed, back when I had the troublesome Lenovo laptop, a Windows 10 laptop made by Lenovo. Interesting coincidence there. It was a Lenovo laptop that was made by Lenovo. How about that? Which was constantly getting the blue screen of death. I would be lucky to go a week without it doing it. It mainly did it when I was watching YouTube videos, but it only did it every now and then, and sometimes it would be SOD when I wasn't watching YouTube videos. Sometimes it wouldn't even be SOD, but it would just freeze and become completely unresponsive. And if it did that when I was watching a video, then the audio would not cut off, but freeze as well. And when that happened, if I was using headphones, the frozen audio would start playing out of the laptop speakers instead of the headphones. It would be something like, well, and I know exactly what he's saying here. I have heard this where it's kind of gets a stutter, well, and just like a record stuck and playing over and over the same bit. I've added a bit of space for you if you want to try and guess what the problem may have been. Further down is what I think the problem was based on the errors that the BSOD messages had. Well, based upon his description here, he wasn't getting a consistent symptom of the blue screen of death. So my guess was that it's a hardware problem that is randomly happening. And when it happens, it is causing a variety of different symptoms. Although he does say it's usually in YouTube videos. Now, it could have been usually happening during YouTube videos because that's mostly what he does with his computer. So that's when somebody says, every time I get a blue screen of death, I'm doing this. Well, is that the only thing the person ever does on his computer? Is that all he uses his computer for, or he or she? So you got to ask that question. The interview portion of these 5 steps is very important to get the nuances and details and yeah, but. I'm scrolling down here through all of his blank space. Based on the errors shown on the BSOD from that laptop, there seemed to be an issue with the RAM hardware problem and maybe other hardware and or software related problems as well. But the only thing I can remember is that some of the errors definitely pointed to a RAM issue. I have had a few BSODs on my current computer, which is a desktop, but those have been few and far between. I think I've had less than 5. Most were back when that computer was still young, and I've not had any since upgrading it to Windows 11. Now, reliability history, let's go look at that. You should be able to find old stuff in reliability history. On this graphic part, it doesn't go back very far. The graphic pages don't go back very far, but down here, view all problem reports. You should be able to get back here in history and be able to find everything that's in here since the last time that you reinstalled Windows or the last time that you cleared out all of your event viewer history. I think when you clear out all event viewer history, you would lose all this stuff. And then here's a bunch of more clicks for all these things. So that goes back. Oh, and notice the dates are kind of mixed up because in Wave Console, how far back does that go? And then this one goes back to more. How far back in date in time can we go? And these are not very, let's see. Yeah, they're in ascending date order. So if you've got stuff from a long time ago that you don't remember the details, you should be able to go find them in reliability history. You can also find them in Event Viewer, but they're more difficult to find. Let's see. So I got partway through that. And the hardware, most were back when the computer was still young, and I've not had any since upgrading to Windows 11. And that computer did have a weird hardware malfunction of some sort, which I am still unsure what went wrong with it. But for whatever reason on that day, it wouldn't turn off. And I've seen this. Windows was working normally, but the computer itself was refusing to turn off. No, I won't turn off. That's basically the way it behaves. Windows was working normally. Wouldn't you like employees that do that? No, I won't stop working. Doug's around here. None of them do that. It wouldn't turn off. Windows was working normally, but the computer itself was refusing to turn off. Windows would display shutting down, but then return to the sign-in screen. The hardware reset button wasn't working either. It was a separate button to the power button. The only thing that worked was holding the power button down. No idea what happened then, but it hasn't done it since. Well, what happened then is the shutdown command was failing to work. I'm going to say that's what it is, because like you can go to the Windows button and click power and then click shutdown, but all that does really is launches the shutdown command. So Windows key R, you can type shutdown here because shutdown is a command. So if it fails to shut down using a shutdown command, then the shutdown program is not working. It's failing to work. So then you hold down the power button. Now, I actually just made up that explanation off the top of my head. I've never described that to anyone else, that shutdown is just a program on your computer. Well, it's a command. I don't think there's a file anywhere called shutdown. I could be wrong, but you can do parameters for that. Shutdown /s space /t space 3. That's a common command that I use. And that'll issue the shutdown command with the /s, means shutdown. The /t is for time. That's 3 seconds if I put the number 3. So it's going to give a 3-second countdown as it shuts down. I don't know what other parameters you can give to the shutdown command. I haven't tried them. I see lots of conversation going on in chat. I'm not trying to yell at me about anything going wrong. Let's see, then it hasn't done. I also had I had a one-off BSOD on my Windows 7 laptop, which I still have no clue what caused that. I do not ever try to track down a single instance of a blue screen of death. A one-off blue screen of death, just ignore it. It's quite possible and likely that a subsequent update is going to fix whatever caused that. It may very well be that some driver that's on your computer, there's been a update of something else that then causes a conflict with this other driver or software, and so then there's an update. So it probably never happened again because an update fixed it, and it was just a rare thing that happened. Edit. Just remembered that I even managed to cause my desktop computer to completely freeze and become unresponsive. This is fun. I even managed. This is a worthy goal, a worthy objective, to put effort into causing your computer to completely freeze. I mean, it just struck my sense of humor. I even managed to cause my desktop computer, success, yes, to cause my computer to completely freeze and become unresponsive when I was trying to use a VR headset, virtual reality headset. I had previously successfully installed and set up the headset, but I had uninstalled the software for the headset to free up some space on the drive, and it was several months later when I reinstalled the software, which was when I ran into issues. I ended up reinstalling Windows. Something you could have tried there was do a Google search to see if there's some kind of uninstall program or clean uninstall for all of that VR software, so that you can get rid of all of the files, all of the folders, all of the registry entries, because typically when you uninstall any software, it does not completely clean up after itself. Then if you install a more recent version afterwards, the two different versions might have a conflict with each other. So by reinstalling Windows, presuming you deleted the partition and did a fresh install of Windows instead of reinstalling on top of the existing Windows, then you took care of it that way. But you might have been able to get one step easier by finding some kind of clean uninstall for that VR headset software. Now, let's see, did I dual booted? Okay, so I finished. Oh, that was the one that had all those blank lines. Then come up here to new voyeur, repairing dead. This is that HP all-in-one and this Xfinity too slow. We've seen comments on those videos still coming in. I'm hoping this 5 steps to fix BSOD is going to become popular like these two were, that they're still generating new visitors New Voyeur says, can skip through lots of boring fine details, should have checked the battery voltage, which likely caused the problem. I scratched my head a little bit. I wonder what in the world he's getting at there, boring fine details. But I did not test the voltage during that video, and I think a number of people would have liked to have seen that, but didn't do that. Heavy Hitters Gaming regarding Comcast. My Ethernet speed at the beginning of data reset is 1415 megabits per second. When I use over 300 gigabits of data, my speed drops to 340 megabits per second. It flat out throttling. Okay, so he's saying his speed throttles to that. Well, now, no, maybe not. Maybe not. If he's making this conclusion by uploading or downloading very, very large files and using Task Manager to monitor, or something else to monitor his speed, and let's see, go to the network, monitoring his network speed here, and he's only seeing 340 megabits per second. He thinks it's throttling, and he's thinking, why am I not getting that full speed? Well, the computer on the other side of the communication might not be allowing you to be using that much of their bandwidth. So it's very rare that you're going to be able to use this level of bandwidth on any large file upload or download, because the site that you're trying to do that to is not likely going to allow that much throughput. For you to get that much, see that actual throughput in uploading or downloading a file, this might work. I don't know, but it might work where on your side, your computer, your in-house network, and your internet connection is capable of the 1.4 gigabits per second, and you are uploading or downloading to another computer that you have control of, like maybe in a client's office or a friend's home or something, where their computer and their internal network and their internet is capable of that speed, and you're making a direct connection between the two, maybe through a VPN or through a remote desktop connection. You know, not a good thing to do on the open internet, but for a short period of time, you could do that to try to see that. But I don't think you're ever going to see that uploading or downloading from a specific website. Let's see, am I understanding his statement right? My Ethernet speed at the beginning of a data reset is 1415. When I use over 300 gigabits of data, my speed drops to 340. Now, the other way that he might be saying that is after he does a reset of this router, and then after utilizing 300 gigabits, whether that takes hours or days or weeks, after he reaches 300 gigabits, then does a speed test and only gets 300 megabits per second, that would be an indication that his ISP is throttling his connection because they're only allowing 300 gigabits during a billing cycle. But if you reset your router before the end of the billing cycle, I would expect you still should be throttled if it's your ISP that is throttling you. Those are my thoughts on your statement. Not sure. And Alice saying, great content, very informative to the blue screen of death video. Okay, so now let's go over. Oh, by the way, let's go look at this. Go to, I gotta zoom this down. Who do I redirect to? I go to customization and then redirect, and over here I saw something interesting. So Josh Kinder has some videos scheduled, I do. So there's nothing here from Carrie, there's nothing here from Ken Stout, but I noticed this is new. Primal Video. Now this tells me that Primal Video sent, I have not recently subscribed to Primal Video, so that I know that I've been subscribed to him for a long time. This indicates to me that he recently changed his redirect permissions to allow anybody who's subscribed to his channel to redirect to him. So I'm going to redirect to him today. The most advantageous thing here is if he notices that I redirected to him, the possibility that he might come and check out my channel. This is YouTube growth without the guesswork, question and answer subscriber hangout. So that's a live session. It also might be that he's been allowing anyone to redirect to him, but he doesn't do live streams very often, because the only thing I can redirect to is a live stream or a premiere. But I've never noticed him coming up before on as available to redirect to. So I'm going to redirect to him. Now it's not till 5 p.m. tonight, my time. And go see what that's about. Okay, now let's get to the chat room. Doug, why did it take you so long to get to chat today? Sorry. Because I had things to talk about. That's a good thing. Scrolling to the top. Chris Gear, Windows. So, okay, I'm not seeing all of the chat messages here. Let's go back. Let's go to live chat. See if I can see further back. Nope, 9/11. Let's go see what I see on this screen. And I'll show you monitor number 3. And here I get to see more. Robert with the first message that I saw, 7:07, while he was watching me playing Fortnite, Dennis and I and our other partners. Nick Poverman, I have a friend who writes songs about sewing machines. She's a singer-songwriter, or so it seems. Yeah. And then he says, I know this joke left you in stitches. Just keep them coming. Mike Wojcik, hello. Rick Lakes, Chris Garrett, Ran Israel, Bobby Warren, Nick Poverman, Bobby Warren, Drunken Troll, a.k.a. Sin, Selden Ball, Rick Lakes, Mike Wojcik, Lawn Dog. Every morning get involved with something on my computer. Lexi this morning was Asus software. Again, not happy with it. The Armory Crate. And that continues somewhere else down lower. Chris Garrett, 19 watching, 7 likes. We need more likes. We also need more problems. Chris got a good chuckle out of it. My comment on that BSOD. And there were some other comments that I'd already hearted and thumbed up that I didn't read into the video today. And thank you for all those who did that. Nick Poverman, what do you think of the lesser known name brand NVMe drives that Carrie has been reviewing? I wonder if these will last. Frankly, for the purposes of my business, I don't care. I'm not interested because I'm not building custom computers. I suspect that when you buy one of those drives, it's basically luck of the draw, how that drive is going to work for you. And statistically speaking, you're probably going to be fine. I mean, it's probably, less than 10% of any off-brand cheap manufacturer's drives that you're going to have problems with. Now, some people will say, well, wait a minute, every time I buy a XYZ type of drive, it fails on me. Yeah, that's not a statistically significant report. Sorry, it's not. If so, I'll stick with the name brand myself when and if I do buy them, because it's not a big enough volume for me to worry about saving that money, and I just charge it to my client. And if we have a problem with it down the road and they come to realize that I bought a cheap one, they'll say, why did you buy a cheap one? Because my time costs so much more in response compared to any hardware. So I stick with the better known drives. So that might not be the opinion that you are looking for, but that is my take on it for my purposes. Why is he deleting an EFI partition? The reason for that is because the EFI partition is on a different drive than his boot partition. And he wants to get the EFI partition on the correct drive. Well, Greg, you probably understand that by now because that comment was at 9:03. If I was used to allow the drive to boot, yeah, I already described that. I think he's demonstrating his preference for Linux, and I would like to make more comments, but it's not my show. The EFI partition, which is the bootable partition, and which drive. The EFI partition is not the bootable partition itself, but it tells the computer where the bootable partition is. And Israel, I'm going to skip over some of these because there's a lot of stuff in there. Nested loop, recursive. Recursive is the word that I was after. I had to fix the files in an EFI partition one time to fix a non-bootable drive. If he wants to boot Linux on this system, I would remove all drives except the drive they want for Linux, install Linux. I agree with that completely. So does Alice. Use the UEFI to select the bootable drive on power up. No, UEFI, you can select which drive you want the computer to look at first, but that's not going to control which drive is going to be used, because the EFI partition, no matter which physical drive it's on, is going to tell the computer which drive and which partition to boot from. UEFI, all you can do is change the order that the computer is going to look at the drives. Now, if it looks at the drives and there's an EFI partition on more than one drive, then the first one it comes to is probably going to have control over which drive gets is booted. Windows updates will clobber the grub bootloader at times. I'm not going to use Kelly, Chris. We no longer say partitions, we say rooms, and the rooms have windows. Microsoft next operating system is going to be called doors. The rooms got to have doors. Doors will run inside of Windows. Okay. I'm going to skip through some of these a bit. Long Dog to Gris, great explanation. Now I see the direction Windows is headed in the future. Yeah, there you go. That's Windows 12. It's not going to be called Windows 12. It's going to be called Doors 12, right? Make a video about that and publish it. See how much views you get. Delete the EFI and see what happens. Yeah, so essentially he did, right? And then he restored the EFI partition from the original drive to the drive that had Windows 11. That's interesting that you were able to do that. Brick wall. Yeah, that'd be a way to brick a computer, changing Windows for doors. I wonder if they created Macrium Reflect USB stick, remove the Sabrent drive, use Macrium tools to write bootloader out to the Samsung drive. That is what it sounds like he did. Okay, Drunk Control Sin. Yes, trying to teach myself data forensics. Want the right tools. Yeah, so why not get rid of Windows entirely? If I were to create a dual boot system, I would use a tool that's designed for dual boot operating systems as the first screen that will allow you to choose which operating system to load. Now, in that event, I think what you're going to have there is the EFI partition is going to instruct the computer to launch the multi-boot tool, right? Because the UEFI BIOS is going to tell the computer what order to look at the drives. It's going to find, it's looking for an EFI partition. That EFI partition must be telling the computer to launch your dual boot operating system that lets you choose which of the valid installed bootable operating systems to launch. Interesting. Never thought that one through. Puts itself between the bootloader and the basic operating system, somehow allows you to choose, provides an interruption. That's correct. Just the actual small 100 megabyte boot partition. It was what Costanza used, restored it to his Windows 11 drive. And it's just much easier than fiddling with Windows, especially UEFI stuff. Well, you're not going to get away with the UEFI BIOS stuff. You're still going to have to deal with that. He was referring to the dual boot, right? Yeah. In the early days when UDFI first came out, it was very problematic to mix Linux and Windows at the same time, but tools have been developed these days that take care of the problems. Linux does not support the safety that UEFI provides. It won't be long before they have such a system, or they will join UEFI for safety reasons. At least that's what we're being told about. Well, now when you use Linux, you're not avoiding UEFI. UEFI is still there because that's your BIOS configurations. With Linux, I suspect that an EFI partition still exists that's telling the computer to boot the Linux bootable partition. Wouldn't it be? Because the UEFI BIOS is looking for an EFI partition. Well, it wants to find an EFI partition. That EFI partition could be telling the computer to boot the Linux system or the Windows system or whatever, and tell it what drive it's on and what partition it's in. Oh, let's see, we're at 9:15 there for Lawn Dog. Let me get back to this easier to see screen. UDFI. I don't know what that stands for off the top of my head. Windows and usage, let's see, 100 megabyte partition's been missing for a while now. Seems to work okay. Oh, Rick's saying his 100 megabyte partition has been missing. You don't have a EFI partition? How is that? Well, that might be on an older computer where you don't have a UEFI BIOS. You have the old well, BIOS, basic input output system. This is weird. UEFI BIOS, that's really not a valid way to say it, right? UEFI CMOS, what am I missing there? Did you go to the cabin yesterday? I went to the cabin on Tuesday, stayed overnight to Wednesday, came back Wednesday. The internet was down. They are rebuilding the deck and accidentally cut through, I assume it's accidental, cut through the internet connection. So I left earlier than I would usually leave on Wednesday because while I'm intending to not do much work up there, I do need to be able to connect remotely to my clients' offices if they have an urgent need. So since I didn't have internet connection, I left Wednesday morning and got back here about noon on Wednesday. And by the time 1:30 came around, I had already been to 3 different clients' offices. I came home and changed clothes first. Well, apparently Google search says some Linux operating systems are now currently supporting UEFI. Oh, of course, yeah, they should be. Told you it was coming. How can the system boot without the 100 megabyte partition? It should be there just hidden. I would think that'd be the case. It says, nope, it isn't hidden. Is it an old computer? Not going to say it's not there, but in my experience, removing the 100 megabyte partition, the system won't boot. I thought that would be the case, that it won't boot. I didn't remove it in File Explorer. It's not there, but in System Info, it is there. Yeah, it would never. The 100 megabyte partition will never show up in File Explorer. It's not going to show up in here anywhere. But when you go to, let's see, right-click on Windows and go to Disk Management, you should see it in here, and there's other places where you should see it. Oh, I might get a copyright strike if I do that tune too much longer. Come on, Disk Management. Get in here, come on, there it goes. So that EFI partition right here, 100 megabyte EFI system partition. Yeah, it should be visible in here. It might not be on the same drive that has your C drive. Case in point, we've seen that from a couple people recently. I didn't remove it. It's in File Explorer. It's not there, but in System Info, it's there. Okay, System Info. So he's saying Windows key R and then MS Info 32. That's one way to bring up System Info. So he's seeing it in here somewhere. I'm not going to go try to find it in there, but that's what System Info is. Greg M., this morning I was tinkering with my ASUS Summary Create software. Not happy with the way it works. It's always been goofy, but now I've confirmed it. I just wanted to create some stepped lighting profiles. I won't turn off, says Tim. Chris Garrett has answers. I'm going to highlight that one, click there, and see what that answers is. Is it going to come up? Yeah, it's coming up somewhere. There it is. It came up over here on monitor 3. Can I delete system reserve? Is there a possibility to install Windows 7 clean install without making the extra hidden partition? How can I delete this partition? Why is it 4? I have the feeling that this slows down my hard drive a little. Thanks for posting. 100 megabyte partition as the system partition contains boot files. Disk Manager will not allow you to remove this partition because removing this partition could cause the system not to boot. Thanks for posting your question. So that answer is no, you cannot delete it and still have a functional computer. I have only 2 partitions in File Explorer. Yeah, it's not going to show in File Explorer. Apparently my computer, Greg M, and you know what, I wonder, do I still have this? If I come back here to Disk Management, can I come to this partition, right click? No, you cannot map a drive letter. Yeah, no, you can't access that through File Explorer. Long Doug, apparently my computer, Greg M, when you put it to sleep, leaves the RAM lights on, and apparently it bothers my wife at night. The light goes down the hallway and it's bothering her. What I do for that, well, I'll put it, I'll hibernate it rather than sleep is my way to deal with that. That would be my way to deal with it. I don't sleep in the same room as Big Beast. I know some of you think I do, but no. But hibernating would do it. I should turn out that light. Ran to Rick. System partition shouldn't appear in File Explorer. Seen in Disk Management. All right, how far behind am I? Yikes. All right, I'm going to go read the oranges. I'm go live today if you want to do it. No, I'm going to redirect to that person that showed up because I've never seen him before, and that could be beneficial to my channel if he does take notice of my channel. You can put your link into chat, Tim. You're always welcome to do that. It's a good thing you had a lot to talk about, bud. Okay. Next, orange. Alice, my computer spotlight has changed now. It gives me text on the login screen, but the image changes every few days instead. It's not changing every day. Windows Spotlight on the lock screen should change daily. Oh, I was meaning to show this. My desktop, Windows Spotlight desktop today. Very appropriate. Since I just came back from the cabin, I saw a lot of these trees up there. I will go back and read through the messages that I'm skipping past for the new Call of Duty in the next hour. That's what he's doing. Thanks for your opinion on those NVMe drives. That's what I was looking for. Oh, good. No, my opinion was useful to you. UEFI-based firmware instead of BIOS-based firmware. That's the way to call it. UEFI firmware. That's firmware settings. UEFI based firmware. Somehow that just doesn't quite have the same ring as BIOS settings. UEFI settings. That UEFI settings. That's when you go into the settings screens for unified extensible whatever. Firmware. Whatever. Okay, yeah, today's Windows Spotlight is beautiful. My desktop picture set of trees. It's beautiful. What a wonderful picture. Glad somebody showed it. Yeah, and a little unclear about, it seems to me that there is some correlation where at least a lot of people get the same image. I don't know whether it's on lock screen or on desktop. It seems to be kind of shared. And I also notice another symptom when I do the lock screen, I'm not always getting that prompt up in the upper right and upper left to click on to say that I like it or don't like it. All right, Doug, shut up. Into this live stream, why don't you already? Firmware contains the UEFI. Okay, yeah, firmware, there's a CMOS chip on the motherboard. Some motherboards have a backup CMOS chip, and that's where that code is stored. And if you have a UEFI system, then it's UEFI that's stored there. Or if you have the older BIOS system, it's BIOS that's stored on that CMOS chip. Again, many of the things I say I'm not expert on. That's why you guys are here to correct me on. But part of the reason for doing this channel is because I want to learn more. And I do learn more by virtue of your participation. Ran Israel, the firmware is on a flash chip, non-volatile. CMOS is volatile, hence the battery. Okay, flash chip. So ROM, the flash chip is read-only memory. That's non-volatile. Flash chip, read-only memory. Now, but read-only memory, you can change the content of the read-only memory. And when a battery, CMOS battery wears out, you lose your time and date settings and your other settings. So CMOS is volatile, hence the battery. Firmware on the chip, that's the software that is, it's firm because it's on a piece of hardware, it's on a chip. It's not magnetically stored. It's not magnetically stored on a disk somewhere. Okay, kind of. And he says there are two chips involving. So firmware on a flash chip, a separate chip that is needs the battery to back it up because it operates more like RAM memory. CMOS equals RAM volatile. So the CMOS is volatile. So it's like a memory chip. Memory chips have, when you turn the computer off, they lose their content. CMOS chip is like a memory chip in that it has to have power to retain its information. So that's the volatile chip. The other chip that contains the firmware does not need the battery to retain its stuff, but it can be updated. So when we update BIOS, that word again, we call it updating firmware. All right, so that is updating what's on that non-volatile chip that doesn't need a battery. Lawn dog laughing at me. You're really struggling with that concept. Think about the old programmable EEPROMs. Some are write once only. Call that firmware. Yeah, I'm not having a hard time. I'm not really struggling with the concept. I'm struggling with how to speak it, how to say it. But I think I understand it correctly. Doug, you promised to end this. You promised to shut this down a long time